Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bill Vick, and this is my weekly You Are Not Alone podcast. And we're not alone today. We're with Jackson Collins of SOCO Security. And Jackson, welcome to You Are Not Alone.
Thank you so much for the welcome, Bill.
You bet. We're looking forward to hearing about SOCO security. And, as I think about security and I see security services at malls and different places, I always wonder about, how you get into that kind of work, the challenges of that kind of work. Is it something that is in that you work in cooperation with the local authorities and so forth, and the requirements to do that? But before we go down that road, just tell us about yourself, your background, and what got you into security work.
Absolutely. So I have been in security for just over 12 years now. Before security, I was a math and sciences tutor coming fresh out of high school for 8 years. I tutored high school and college students, make money on the side as I went to the JC.
Hmm.
I got in my first real relationship in college. And at the time, my girlfriend, now my wife of many years, mother of my children,
Hmm.
told me I needed to get a job because we needed to move out of my mom's house.
Oh, there you go. It sounds like
Uh,
great advice.
it was some of the best advice I ever took. She told me I needed to get a job, and I hadn't graduated college yet. I had no W-2 work experience, but although I may not look it on camera, I'm 6'8", and I decided to go looking for a job that would hire me based on my size.
Well,
It was
six
the
foot
biggest
eight
asset.
and the security business, other than playing for maybe the 49ers, not a bad choice.
It worked out well for me. I
Just
got the
showing up
first job.
sometimes solves many problems.
It really does. Me, I have what is known in our industry as command presence,
Hmm.
naturally, just by virtue of my size and the calm demeanor and cadence in which I speak.
Hmm.
So it helps de-escalate situations naturally. The fact that I am also as strong as someone my size helps if
Hmm.
things do not de-escalate. I started my first job over at Montgomery Village here in Santa Rosa for the overnight holiday
Oh
shift.
my
So
gosh.
I know I was there midnight to 8 a.m., making sure that the additional decorations and stuff for Montgomery Village were not disturbed at night and unwanted visitors were not
They do a
setting up
beautiful
camp.
job at Montgomery Village during the holidays. I always liked their decorations. And now I know why they were always there and always in good shape and looked so pretty. You were there taking care of
Absolutely. Uh,
them.
I did
Now,
a Go ahead.
would I understand you're OSHA 30. Now, what is OSHA 30?
OSHA 30 means that I took 30 hours of training in general industry safety, um, and workplace environment, health, and safety trainings.
Hmm.
So I got to learn more about exposed electrical wires and forklift certifications and working alone policies and tight workplace policies. Um,
Right.
I did all of that certification back when I was working at Herbal Distributions, which was a large scale cannabis distribution firm
Oh
here
my
in Santa
goodness. Yeah,
Rosa.
the challenges of the cannabis industry as it unfolded over time are just amazing. Some of the problems they had and the risks associated with that industry. And I think it continues to a degree today, right, Jackson?
Absolutely. The company I mentioned, Herbal,
Hmm.
I left their employ back in 2022. And within the year, they had gone under. In 2022, they had $700 million in sales.
Oh my
And in
God.
2023, they suddenly went bankrupt.
Unbelievable. Any idea why? Was it just competition, poor money management, or they
I
expanded too fast, or what?
Seeing the operations from the inside as I did, I would say a lot of it was poor money management.
Hmm.
The executive suite of that company came from FedEx, and they had a great plan on how to make this operate like FedEx, but for cannabis.
Right.
The problem was it did not start with the volume FedEx did.
Oh
And
boy. Yeah.
they started with both executive compensation packages and building financing
Right. Yeah.
that would be appropriate for a much, much larger company than they
Yeah.
were at that time. I saw them gloss over security projects to instead spend money on $20 and $30 deck installations for barbecue parties.
No, I think that it was a classic ready, fire, aim kind of situation. We needed to, crawl, walk, then run in that industry, and it makes it. I think it's a blessing and a curse. The fact that they had the FedEx background, probably very capable, very competent, and could have been very successful, but also their vision was bigger than their pocketbook, and they went for the vision instead of saving the money first, possibly.
Yeah, they had a good amount of venture capital
Hmm.
invested in it. It was
Hmm.
a very promising company that had
Hmm.
many, big cannabis brands associated with it. But again, having gone from almost $750 million in receipts one year to being upside down on your AR and AP the next is just it's telling that there was mismanagement
Hmm.
on many levels.
What was your role? What was SOCO's role in working with that company, or yours specifically?
So this was before I worked with SOCO. It
Hmm.
was I was running their loss prevention, environmental health, and safety for Northern California. There were two warehouses where everything shipped from, one in Santa Rosa and one in Goleta, and they had moved the corporate headquarters to Goleta. So I was the only member of my department in Northern California, and we watched over all of the different vans, the runner vans, as they went out, because
Hmm.
each one of them was equipped with half a dozen or more cameras, high def cameras, a roll cage, an internal cage, a safe inside. The level of security for that business was entirely necessary because of how big of a target cash-based businesses are
Oh yeah.
for the illicit market.
It's very difficult for the cannabis industry, and it's still, I think, difficult because it doesn't have a banking function. I think it's still not, it's approved at the state level, but not at the federal level. And consequently, since it does not have federal approval, they can't use the banking system. So it's a cash and carry business, and that
Yep.
opens up all kinds of problems.
It really does. And when you are when your product is federally illegal, it means that you cannot ship the product
Right.
through normal shipping channels. You cannot, have FedEx or USPS come by and pick up a big old box
Yeah,
of cannabis
exactly.
and take it somewhere. So you have to make that yourself. You have to devise the routes. You have to figure out what protocols to put in place. In my time with that company, there were a number of incidents where either one of the drivers of the runner vans were pulled over by would-be assailants and did not get out because they were properly trained,
Good Lord.
or they got out to do a drop and people came and they were held up at gunpoint and stole the entire van. Now,
Good Lord.
because of the other security measures, no one ever got into the van, no one ever got the product or the cash, but I mean, you can imagine what that does to the morale of the drivers.
Oh
They're
yeah.
not professional security people, they are delivery drivers, just with a very dangerous product.
It reminds me of like a Western movie, and you're a stagecoach. You're delivering, the payroll or the box of gold is in the back of the stagecoach, and you're going down the trail, and here come the bandits.
Absolutely. And they are sophisticated these days.
Really.
They will stage an accident They'll pull in front of known runner vans and slam on the brakes so that they're hit, and then demand people get out of the car, show them insurance. We had to come up with a form that said on it, by company policy, I will not be leaving the cabin. I have called the police and they are on their way to deal with the details of this accident.
So, Jackson, your role was to ride with these people in the vans.
No, I helped establish security protocol
Okay.
and monitor and maintain both the access control and camera systems for the
Hmm.
site. In my EHS hat at
Hmm.
Herbal, I also managed a lot of the contractors for the fire system, for the water pressurization, for anything that had to do with the safety of the site. But I only went out on route maybe once or twice.
Hmm. And how long did you work with that company? Oh, they only
I worked
licensed
with
a year, I guess, right? Yeah,
I worked with them for almost 2 years.
2 years. And how did you form SOCO Private Security? How did that come about?
So SOCO was actually founded in 2013 by a man named John Ervolino. He had been in the industry for a number of years and saw that there was something lacking in the security industry, more personal touch,
Hmm.
a more responsive managerial staff, more focused on making sure that our officers have what they need so that they can provide the services needed to our clients.
Hmm.
Um, he worked on the company for almost 10 years. Then in 2022, after I left Herbal, I did about 2 months at Keysight Technologies, where I ran their global security operations
Hmm.
center.
I know Keysight very well. Yes.
Um, and at that time, I was called by John, who told me that he had just been given 9 days' notice from his current operations manager. And at the end of that notice was John's vacation to go officiate a cousin's wedding. So he needed someone to come in and run his company starting immediately.
Wow.
Um, this came at a time that I was considering my next step in
Mhm.
my career. I had already looked into the possibility of either starting or purchasing my own security company, as I had been in operations for 6 years.
Hmm.
And after starting on with John, we just started talking about what both of us had in store for the future. In less than a year after starting with him, I ended up buying the company with some some funds that came from my wife's grandfather's passing. Uh,
Okay.
it Things happened to come together in a very timely manner,
Hmm.
though it was a very hard loss for our family. Um, but without her grandfather, we never would have been able to put a down payment down and start a
Hmm.
payment plan to buy our company. And here we are 2 years later, and we are thriving.
Tell us about the company, how many employees you have, and a little bit about your ideal client.
Absolutely. So right now we have 35 full-time employees. Um, our span of operations is from Sonoma County all the way south to San Francisco and then east to Brentwood. We have grown about 40% since our acquisition of the company back in April of 23. And our ideal clients would be property management firms with multiple sites that reside within Sonoma, Marin, Napa, Mendocino, San Francisco, Solano, or Contra Costa County.
Hmm.
We do some work in Alameda, but not quite as much until we get a branch over in Vallejo.
Hmm.
We do work with local governments. Before I worked at SOCO Private Security, I was the operations manager for the Sonoma County and Marin County airports, the
Hmm.
Sonoma and Mendocino County courthouses, and the nuclear power plant in Eureka.
Okay.
So our management staff has experience on private and public sector
Hmm.
projects. I have been a subcontractor for PG&E during the Tubbs fires. That was a very interesting project to work on.
I can only imagine.
But we are looking to grow. We are growing and we're looking to expand our services in a market that is becoming more and more difficult to hire in. Um,
I can only imagine. And what kind of training do you provide for your employees? And do you often get, not often, but do you get people that have had security backgrounds or maybe even worked in fire departments or police departments and other agencies that come to you?
so we do occasionally get people from fire or police. More frequently, we get veterans.
Mm-hmm.
People who are coming fresh out of the service or a couple years out of the service, and they're still not sure exactly what their long-term plan is, but the structure of security is very familiar to them from the military.
Mm-hmm.
So they like the chain of command, they like knowing what their duties are from hour to hour. It's a very stable job because I tell almost everyone that I interview this when times are bad, people need more security. And when times are good, people afford more security.
Interesting. That's a really
So
interesting way to say that, Jacqueline.
we are an industry that is always in growth. During COVID, we grew. During fires, we grew. In times of emergency, people need security more than ever. And then when the emergency is over, the security is still there. So throughout every major catastrophe in the last decade, I have been gainfully employed in security
Mm-hmm.
and watching as friends and family members go through the economic uncertainty that comes with being in restaurants or retail or even some of the public sector during COVID.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you, what's your relationship with local authorities, the police department and other agencies?
So we try and be as friendly and as amicable as we can be with local authorities. Their job is much more difficult than ours. They have to deal with people on a level that we are lucky not to. I'll tell you this straight up: most of our post orders, uh, in the worst case scenarios, end with retreat and call law enforcement. So they are a big part of what makes the security industry work.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, in recent years, we are finding that even with our partners in law enforcement, the response to security issues that are nonviolent has become slower. And that is no single party's problem.
Uh,
That is not a law enforcement problem. It's not a DA problem. It is 100 small things that add up. We have, mental health crises with too few mental health facilities. We have too few officers out there that now have a higher liability
mm-hmm.
after the Black Lives Matter and defund the police movements
Mm-hmm.
have, really amplified the scrutiny on any action taken by law enforcement. And then we have DAs who have to simultaneously uphold the laws of our state and federal government and measure whether it is worth putting someone into an already overtaxed jail and prison system versus allowing someone to just remain on private property and set up a camp.
Yeah,
Um,
Jackson, with the homeless situation, I can only imagine, and that's compounded by mental illness and substance abuse and so forth.
it is.
It is really a very, very difficult time. And how many private security firms are there in say, in the area you're talking about?
Dozens.
Really? That many?
Yes.
And I've seen your I think your cars are vans, and I've seen the Shield, but I'm not aware of many other security agencies. But there's quite a few, huh?
There, anywhere you look in America, and frankly, in most places around the world, you will find the name Allied Universal. They
Hmm.
are the world's largest security company. They're the fourth largest private employer in America and the sixth largest in the world.
I did not know that. Allied Security,
Allied Universal.
Allied Universal. Okay, and where are they headquartered?
I believe they're headquartered in Southern California. That's where they started up as Allied Barton
Hmm.
before they merged with Universal Protection Services. But they have over 100,000 active employees in the continental United States.
Hmm.
Um, Other players in this area, we have probably four or five within Sonoma County that are around my same size.
Hmm.
Then you have some of the other large players, Securitas, Pal American, Triple Canopy.
Hmm.
These are the companies that have large federal contracts, or they have the Kaisers, or they have the Sutters. The contracts that are too large in a regional sense for companies of my size to take on.
Hmm.
Uh, but as we were discussing, everyone needs security, and those
Hmm.
large companies don't care as much about a strip mall with three stores that needs 4 days a week of coverage.
Correct.
They're not going to receive the same level of service as, say, a Facebook or an Oracle.
Hmm. You find that there's do you have like an association of security types? Like you said, there's multiple security companies here in the North Bay. Do you all have like an affiliation group, an industry group that meets that kind of thing?
So there are a few industry groups for security. Our company is part of CalSaga, which is the preeminent security lobbying group
Hmm.
for the state. It represents most of the largest security companies and many of our small to medium sized security companies,
Hmm.
and helps influence the Bureau of Security and Investigative Services on regulations to make sure that they are achievable. We
Hmm.
are one of the more heavily regulated industries in California.
Oh, I can
Be
imagine. Oh, you bet.
Absolutely. As a deep blue state, anything having to do with firearms or, arrest, anything having to do with really in any way impairing someone from doing whatever they want in a
You
lawful
know, like
manner.
physically restraining someone, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Detentions, arrests, uh, searches, seizures, anything like that is going to be very, very heavily regulated.
Hmm. And I think you said it earlier when we first started talking that your work is almost like being present, recognizing the threat, retreating, as you say, and then contacting the local authorities for if things get out of hand and get more serious. Is that kind of like the right process?
So we are one of the few remaining companies in this area who does allow our officers to go hands-on when the situation calls for it.
Hmm.
A lot of companies have pulled back from that because, as I was saying, we are very highly regulated. And in order to do that correctly, there is a volume of additional training and management required to make
Hmm.
sure that, say, an example would be one of our officers is out on site and there is an unwanted individual on the site. They are told this is private property. You must leave or you will be trespassing. And that person decides to start a physical altercation with our officer. Now, our post orders and our use of force are to, at any point possible, retreat and call for backup, but that isn't always possible. As you said, mental illness, dependency issues, substance abuse, people are not all in their right minds and cannot all be reasoned with or de-escalated. And it is not always easy or practicable to physically remove yourself from the situation before addressing the violence that has been thrown at you. So we make sure that our officers understand the proper ways to subdue and arrest someone who has broken the law in our presence, which they would
Hmm.
be doing by assaulting us, and
Hmm.
then contact the police and make sure that the custody of this person is transferred from us to local law enforcement and
Right.
then documented appropriately and reported to the appropriate government agencies.
Do you operate in teams? Are there, which is not an individual confronting another individual, more than likely there might be two or more of you?
So usually our officers are out there by themselves, but we do have um, we have enough officers out at one time that if something is going wrong that the police cannot address immediately, we can dispatch another person and vehicle to come assist with them.
Hmm.
Or if we know of um, a specific site that needs additional attention. For instance, we recently took over a site on Guerneville and Fulton that
Hmm.
had an entire village worth of people who had invaded these living spaces that had not been lived in for some time and barricaded themselves into garages.
Oh my
With
goodness.
Yeah, that was an interesting site for us to tackle, but we took three of us out there. We were able to clear the top stories before we found someone barricaded into a garage. And with that, again, officer safety comes first. We retreated, we called law enforcement, they came out, and they were able to help clear the building. Now, the person was able to get away because they had broken holes through every wall
Oh my
to make
goodness.
sure that they had a path of retreat from any place they were in. So they were able to get out, but we, at a later date, were able to find them on site again and get law enforcement out there to have them arrested for trespassing. Since then, the site's garbage and all of the contents of those buildings has been cleared. We don't expect to see that happen again.
Hmm. Um, it sounds like I don't know how to say it. Is it a growth industry? You kind of think that maybe it's not, that there'd be more and more security and safety in our communities, but it sounds like you kind of like in today's environment, not enough police, not enough funding in the local communities, and unfortunately, you might be in a growth business in a way.
We are, and part of that comes down to not only is there not enough funding for law enforcement and for projects like the in response team here in Santa Rosa, which I am a big fan of.
Well, that's one that they come up for mental illness. There's something going on, and the person has a problem. They're not really a threat to anything other than that they just don't understand, or they're emotionally, upset.
Exactly, and our men and women in blue are not professionally trained to handle and specifically de-escalate mental health crises that
Hmm.
are not breaking the law.
Right.
And they shouldn't have to be. They are law enforcement. They should be out there enforcing the law. And we should have additional resources for mental health response.
Exactly.
Um, but with that said, with the defund the police and Black Lives Matter and social media and the advent of the camera in your pocket, more and more people are shying away from wanting response from law enforcement and warming to the idea of having a security presence instead,
Hmm.
having a deterrent
Hmm.
as a preventive measure, as a proactive measure, rather than having to call out a response after an incident has happened.
Right. Well, Jackson, I applaud your work and admire it because in today's world and environment, it's something that sadly is very much needed, and I can see why there'd be growth. And it sounds like you've got a really squared away company, and you're approaching it very solidly. And I wish you great success. And if we need to get in touch with you, what's the easiest way to do that?
The easiest way to get in touch with me would be to go to socoprivatesecurity.com
Hmm.
or contact us through our phone, which is 707-331-2908.
Okay. 707-331-2908.
Yes.
Okay, if you need some security in your life, I recommend calling Jackson Collins. Okay, Jackson, thanks so very much, buddy. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill. Have yourself a good day.
You bet.